Welcome to At Ease, a podcast for colored girls who fled corporate when six figures wasn't enough. I am your host, Cristin, and every year around the MLK holiday, we hear powerful words about justice, dignity, and equality. But what we talk about far less is what injustice costs us internally, not just socially or economically, but psychologically. For many people, especially those navigating high pressure or inequitable work environments, injustice is not just theoretical. It shows up in meetings where it does not feel safe to speak, in decisions that feel inconsistent, and in the emotional labor of constantly managing how you are perceived. Over time, that takes a toll on mental health. Today's conversation is about that cost. I am joined by Stephanie Lewis, a mental health expert, to explore what prolonged stress, lack of psychological safety, and diminished dignity do to the mind and body. This conversation is for leaders, HR professionals, and especially for those who are quietly asking themselves, why does this feel so heavy? You are not imagining it, and you are not alone. And I am so excited to introduce our guest today. Stephanie Lewis is a woman of God, a licensed professional clinical counselor with supervisory designation, a trusted voice at the intersection of faith, mental health, and leadership. Over the course of her career, Stephanie has served across the nonprofit, county government, private, and corporate sectors of mental health. She currently works within the corporate mental health space, collaborating alongside state, nonprofit, managed care, research, and academic leaders to enhance the quality and implementation of evidence-based mental health practices across the state of Ohio. In addition to her primary role, Stephanie is the founder of the Perspective Liaison and Engagement Group, where she provides individual, family, and couples counseling, as well as consultation and contract services. Her work has included supporting minority nursing students through a collegiate partnership, facilitating gun violence prevention and youth mental health groups in urban communities, and serving as a contracted therapist, trainer, and speaker for faith-based mental health organizations that promote the integration of spirituality and psychological wellness. Stephanie is also the creator of D&D, Divorce Not Destroyed, a growing community and platform designed to support healing, restoration, and identity after divorce. Rooted in faith, humility, and purpose, Stephanie's work reflects her belief that healing is possible, identity can be restored, and mental health care can be both clinically and spiritually grounded. Rooted in faith, humility, and purpose, Stephanie's work reflects her belief that healing is possible, identity can be restored, and mental health care can be both clinically sound and spiritually grounded. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing? Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm tired. So I'm gonna be sipping my coffee over here.
Enjoy.
Because I should be on my second cup now, and I'm not. And, but I really appreciate you joining me as the mental health professional that you are. As we're coming up on MLK Day, actually, this will probably go live on MLK Day. I just got done with a speaking engagement, and one of the things that we talked about was the mental health of our leaders.
Yeah.
And, growing up, we learned about MLK every year, right? And never
Yeah.
have I ever heard that this man struggled with his mental health. And in preparing for this workshop that I just did, I learned a lot of leaders have had or had struggled with depression. Now, whether or not they were actually clinically diagnosed is like a separate issue, but history has shown, whether it's Abraham Lincoln, Winston Churchill, Princess Diana, right? All of these people really struggled, and I'm sure there's many more, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm always thinking about what does this mean for Black women in the workplace, right? Even if we don't have the same stigma that maybe MLK had in getting support or naming what he was experiencing 50 years ago, 60 some years ago now, excuse me, there's still stigma now. And so, what can we learn from his experiences and just from a mental health perspective, when we think about all that he was fighting for, fairness, dignity, and these are all things that we are still fighting for in many capacities, especially in the workplace. Can you talk about how does like prolonged exposure to silencing, lack of dignity and or unfairness can impact a person's mental health and emotional well-being over time?
Yeah, very good points and so important in this season where there are a lot of emerging leaders now. They're getting younger and younger, right? And the ways in which we are promoted to cope with that level of stress are both productive and destructive. And even the destructive ways are normalized in culture, if that's substance use or just ways to overfunction. And our identities are really grounded in that success by way of overfunction. And so while we've come far in time, I don't know the measure of how far we've come in health and wellness of the mind and the significance of stabilizing that as we try to neutralize and stabilize culture and the movement, right? I just think it's hidden in a different way, in a different way. And it's frightening because we have more knowledge, and yet that doesn't necessarily seem to change the behavior of overfunctioning. So that's my blanket statement. The risk is something called vicarious trauma, which is a term utilized to describe first responders or boots on the ground type of folks that have the mental health and the trauma of others take a toll on them because of their proximity to those traumatic experiences and people's experiences. So vicarious trauma sometimes is coined more frequently, but not as much in the Black community because it's like, oh, post-traumatic, everyone's stressed, or they're strong, they're empowered, or their faith grounds them. And as a woman of faith, I know that the Lord said his burden is light, right? And so that doesn't justify, even in the word of God, that we should bear heavy burdens with a
Mhm.
sense of pride, right? It's actually the opposite. It's actually the
Mhm.
complete opposite. So that's mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, it's the complete opposite. So I know that's a lot. What I think with vicarious trauma, when you talk about Martin Luther King and leaders in general, is that we find our empathy. And I say we, because as a mental health professional, I'm in the same boat, right? We find that our hurt in relation to seeing someone else hurt, our compassion, our empathy, right? It shouldn't take a toll on us because, oh my God, these people had more risk, and it becomes a prioritization of urgency. It's all urgent.
Okay.
Martin Luther King's mental health is urgent. The
Yeah.
community's freedom is urgent. My mental health is urgent. My clients, yours, your community, your clients, it's all urgent. We don't have to choose. And deciding to choose is from a scarcity mindset, which perpetuates that oppressive thinking in the first place. I have to pick one. No, you don't. No, you don't. We all can be well, and it all can be well.
Yeah, when I hear you talk about vicarious trauma and the types of professions where we see this, first responders you mentioned, where we see this show up. I would imagine that we would see this more in the Black community because many of us are on the front lines. We can look at COVID. We were still working, right? When a
Yes.
lot of people were still, you and I are very fortunate in that we work corporate jobs. We were able to move into a virtual space, but there were a lot of people who weren't able to do that, and most of those people were Black and brown folks, right? Who still
Yes.
had to go out and outside of their home and work every single day. But when you talk about like real emergencies, dealing with real, and it's not, I don't want to say real trauma, but I think sometimes in our hierarchical society, our patriarchal society,
Yeah.
we create emergencies in the
Yes.
workplace, right? So everything, and I tell my team, don't none of this matter. I'm like,
It does.
nothing is urgent. There is nothing, at least that we do, that cannot be fixed after the fact. However, that is not always how leadership views things, right? So my thing is, it's everything is emergency, nothing is an emergency. But I'll just give an example. A couple weeks ago, I was off work. I took off work intentionally in preparation for something that I needed to do for a week.
Kudos to you.
Thank you. I
For the audience,
planned.
that's success. That's healthy. That's healthy
That I
boundaries.
planned. I prepped my
Amen.
team, everyone knew, my boss knew, everybody knew what was going on. Well, they didn't know what I was doing because that ain't none of their business. But they knew they knew Cristin is out, right?
Yeah.
Well, there was one day, I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I got 3 missed calls from my
Mm,
boss. And I'm like, "I'm not answering this. I'm not answering this." So when I didn't answer, I started getting text
of
messages
course.
from my staff, right? Long story short, the powers that be somewhere decided to issue some guidance with a new deadline of like the end of the week versus end of the month, which had been what I understood when I left the office. And
Mhm.
so this emergency was created, right?
Yes.
It was created. I know for me in that moment, who was like literally trying to manage something, this is why I took a week off because I had things to do and not wanting to overwhelm myself with that being like dumped on me and like, you need to get this done by Friday. I said to my staff, like, well, what would y'all do if I was out the country? What would y'all do if I didn't have my laptop? What would y'all do but
Yeah.
my heart, just the angst
Yeah.
that came with not just like, oh, now you're giving me all this extra stuff that I need to do this week, right? Allegedly,
Yeah.
that has to be done this week. But I can't let go of this thing that I'm supposed to be doing this week because I paid for it, right? It creates an environment, at least for me, it was like really uncomfortable. And eventually I had to say to my staff, stop calling me.
Yeah.
Stop texting me. Make a decision and tell me about it next week.
Yeah.
Like, I said to one of them, like, I love you, but I don't care right now.
Yeah.
And we're not on the front line, right? We're
Right.
not on the front lines.
Right.
Nothing that I do is life or death. But
Yeah.
people approach things in this way. Like this email comes through and it sends you into like overdrive. And so,
Yeah.
do you have anything like, even in environments like that, like where I'm very clear and attempted to set some boundaries,
Yeah.
right? Around this is my time. It still brought up something in me
Yeah.
that week that really didn't feel good. And it was nothing that like a walk couldn't take care of, or, a couple moments of silence, but everyone doesn't respond the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's almost this workplace anxiety that gets promoted to perpetuate loyalty, commitment, and devotion, right? And it all is rooted in identity. So, you seem to have navigated your identity when it came to setting a boundary. Like, I am a woman with boundaries. I'm a woman that prioritizes something else, but I'm also a woman who is committed to my work and I want to have success and I don't want to abandon the team or have a risk of a layoff, right? And so the trauma that you experienced was being furloughed with the risk of being,
And laid off, because we got laid
and
off at
laid
one
off.
point last year too. So yeah, you're right.
So you've had a lot of workplace trauma that promotes this identity at work to be the survivor of the fittest, right? And so it's like the process of elimination is who's the fittest. And so that's a work identity that all those traumatic experiences at work have promoted. So when there is a sense of urgency, it's not about the task at hand. It's about the culture and the risk you have been a part of, which is to lose income and lose your job. So what can people do? One, have an understanding of what you're signing up for and begin to have emotional regulation practices. You mentioned having a walk. Like, it's nothing a walk couldn't fix. So if you have a knowledge of what you've signed up for, you know the stress it'll come with, but you also have emotional regulation practices that will help you cope with it once that wave of angst passes. People must stay grounded in their emotional regulation practices when you have an awareness of the stressful work environment that you have accepted to participate in. Without shame, right? Without shame, knowing that this happens. Well, let's ground ourselves in some truths. One, it happens. Two, I know how to regulate. Three, I I understand that this is no longer my identity, but I have enough wisdom to know when I need to respond based on the urgency at hand. But I'm not going to stay locked into that. That didn't make you then continue to work like that every single day. Once it passed, it passed. But some people who lock into that, always responding, now you're at this state of anxiety up here the whole time, waiting for that moment to happen. So you're always ready. When life ebbs and flows. So if you don't have to function up here, higher functioning at work in a high stress environment, why don't you relax in the times where the flow is more calm and regulate at a high level? So when you have to go back up, you have some of that peace from your downtime. And so it's all about emotional regulation, or choose a different path, which I think which you've also explored, right, Miss
Mhm.
Coach? And so it's like, hey, allow this to also drive your other passions, where in your coaching experience, as you get clients, you're able to see this gives me more peace and I'm making a bigger difference. And I also know how to regulate. So when my clients' emergencies arise, I know that's not my emergency, but it strengthens my intervention, your intervention, right? And it strengthens my signal to regulate. All a gift. I just want to put that out there. It's all a
Mhm.
gift. Just don't stay
Mhm.
stuck there. It's not your identity.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense.
Okay, good.
And, you said culture, like it's the culture, right?
Yes.
And something that I try to tell or talk about with my staff. So we do a lot of reflection. Where have we been? Where do we want to go? All that type of stuff.
You be
And
coaching your staff.
100%, a
I love
hundred
it.
percent, because you're right. You come into a place with a certain culture, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're not about to be running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We're not
Right.
gonna do that, right? Or even when we got called back to work, right, after being
Yeah.
laid off. I'm not about to I personally, I know that I do good work. I
Yes.
also know who I am, and I talked about this in another episode. Like, I also am not fearful of anything because
Yes.
I'm loved, okay? I'm
Yeah.
gonna be fine. It don't matter. Like, what happens in this world, we gonna be all right. And
And that's
so I
identity.
don't, yes. And so I think that's something that really came up during the government shutdown with a lot of people, was how much their identity was wrapped up in their work. And as someone who used to work for the Marine Corps, I thought it was crazy then. Like, I just, I've never been in the military, right? As like an enlisted or an officer, but I worked for the Department of Defense for so many years. And so I could see how beneficial that culture was. Like, you need that as a warfighter, right? You need that buy-in, right? But then when you're like safe in an office space, when you're safe in an office space, so to
And
your
it feels
point that
like a
it's all
war.
a gift. Yes. So to your point that it's all a gift, it's like, you have your tools in your tool belt and you need to know when to use them, right?
Yes.
And so we do a lot of reflecting on my team. And what I am always trying to impart in them is like, well, you're creating the culture.
Yes.
Like, instead of, okay, my boss gave you something because you're acting for me and you're running around trying to get this done, I would be like, well, how does this fit into our priorities that we outlined at the start of the week?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
makes this more important than X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
And sometimes just asking those questions will stop a leader in their tracks and be like, oh, when I came back into the office after that week, and I see all of these emails, all of these things, and I'm getting my debrief, and they're like, we gotta do X, Y, and Z, da 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 da. Da. I just said, like, by when are you requesting these things be done?
Period. That's a boundary.
Not till the end of next week? Okay. So I don't, I think just going back to identity. I think there's a lot of times in the workplace where I don't know, I want to say like your identity can be questioned or
Yes.
challenge because we're holding how we're perceived, right? Even like you think about code switching, like people get into the workplace and some people feel like they cannot show up as their full selves. You have to
Yes.
change the way that you talk or the way that you dress. You're anticipating other people's reactions. You might be dealing with microaggressions. You're deciding what's safe to say. And even I think about talking to clients who maybe they have a goal, right, of a promotion or something like that. But when we get to how they communicate in the workplace, they're silent because
Yeah.
silence feels safe, right?
Yeah.
Silence feels safe for them. What does that ongoing hypervigilance do
Yeah.
to
It breaks
people?
you down. It breaks you down. It breaks you down. One, it definitely compromises your nervous system and ability to regulate emotionally, which then impacts your ability to regulate physically, how your body is managed. Long-term distress can also have impact on your DNA, your child's DNA. Don't get pregnant, and then you get pregnant with that type of stress. Now you have, like imprint on your child's DNA. Epigenetics is a real thing. And so it can promote generational trauma. And people don't talk about that type of generational trauma because we're so busy being in the presence of our own generational trauma from slavery, pre-slavery on, that we don't realize that even as we're healing that DNA imprint, we're adding new ones, because when we were freed, we became enslaved to the workforce. So it's just a different kind of slavery, right? You get beat down in the brain. Now you got beat down then, but now you got beat down. You're getting beat down in the brain because you are married to this perception of freedom, which is really a enslavement to capitalism. And so now you're enslaved to capitalism, and it's defining your identity as a worker bee or a workhorse. And you think that you have to climb and fight and shed yourself, your flavor, your fullness, your boldness, your loudness, to shrinking your identity, that then as that identity is shrunken, it's replaced with this slave identity, this slave of capitalism, and it kills everything else. Because what are you sacrificing? Family, faith, right? Because you at work and you're doing all these work functions, you're sacrificing your relationships, because how many men are removed from the household because they're working so much overtime all the time? You're sacrificing the identity of your children because now they don't get the most peaceful version of you or the father. So now they feel rejected, possibly, or as a burden or as a cost to mommy and daddy's peace. And now you're up there, right? And what happens with a lot of people, not a lot, but significant amount of corporate leaders, right? They are at risk of suicide. I'm
Yeah.
still looking at these leaders
Yeah.
that jump off of their own buildings and
Yeah.
at the peak of their career, because once you reach there, is it worth everything that you've lost? And who are you when you get the prize? Not the person who dreamt of it. She's long gone. He is long gone. And so now that legacy is affected, right? Because you are not even you. You are what society, community, culture designed you to be for the purpose of capitalism. And so I'm not a conspiracy theorist person at all, but I watch patterns, right? I watch patterns in people. And so one thing you said that can combat that hypervigilance, and I know that was a long answer to hypervigilance, but I want people to see it. It's dangerous. It's not just looking over your shoulder and double checking an email. It's imprints and drives everything you do and how you exist in everything. And once you recognize it, it can be too late. But one thing you said that combats that is knowing that you're loved and not being afraid of anything. And once we are empowered to realize that we do not have to fear and that we are loved, none of this stuff, what would you say? None of it matters, and it won't. And we can be a part of the play without getting played. You can. And when I think of Martin Luther King, I just keep thinking about him when we're talking about this. What choice did he think he had? It was a life or death situation, literally. It was a life or death. And so when you're in that level, when he's in that level of angst and he's leading from that, right? Then you're leading from a scarcity, fearful mindset. And this is no diss to Martin Luther King. We all love him. It's to say, how do we do it different in the uprising
Yeah.
revolution? Yes, I'm calling it out. In
Yeah, I
this
mean, this
revolution.
is the I mean, I feel like everything that's happening right now is a great parallel to, what he was dealing with and what was happening in the world.
Yes.
when he was alive. I just want to point out, this is going to sound random, but it's not.
Okay.
Just to talk about like how similar the times are. Did
Lord.
you watch the Wonder Years reboot? Did you ever watch
I
that?
did not. I tried to
Okay.
get into it, but
It
I'm
was
the
so good. I just
I
wanna
could
say I was very hurt
go
when
back.
when it got canceled. I might have cried because it
Really?
was just so good. It was so good, it was so
Go
black,
back to it.
but the first episode was when MLK was assassinated. That happens at the end of the very first episode. But in the intro episode, they're talking about the times,
Mhm.
right? They're talking about an unpopular leader being elected. They're talking about the flu epidemic that's killing hundreds of thousands of people, right? And as they're
Mhm.
saying this, I was like, yeah, I mean, it sounded like everything that they laid out from 1968, the 1960s sounded like 2020. Like I was like, and so I had to go look it up.
Of course you did.
I had to go look it up, and I remember I called my mom, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Did you know there was a flu epidemic when you were 13?" Because and she was like, "No." She was like, "I do not remember that at all." And so I just, to your point, it is. We are in very similar times, right?
Yeah.
And we have evidence, we have history to show us what worked, what didn't work, and we can look to say how we want to do things differently. But
Yes.
something that you said about capitalism,
Huh. I
you
knew you was going.
said, there's a couple things I need to go back to about that. One,
Okay.
because I feel like, and part of the conversation around MLK's mental health challenges is the fact that he's human. He was human.
Period.
We put these leaders like on these pedestals and forget their humanity. But I feel like, they have made him into like this magical Negro and have completely like
What?
whitewashed his ideals and beliefs, right?
Yeah.
He was anti-capitalist,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's not in the history books.
Of course not.
Right. So when you when you were talking about being enslaved to capitalism, because that is the country that we live in, you talked about sacrificing your family. But
Yeah.
the other thing that came up for me, just because it's you and we've had this conversation around our finances,
Oh
right?
Lord.
And, I'm going to have to find the reference, but we have a 40-hour work week to keep us spending money, right? We don't, if you look back in, like, I want to say it's like in the 1920s or the 1930s, they thought by now we would only have like a 20-hour work week because of technology, right? We actually don't need as much time to get our jobs done. But
Absolutely
the
not.
reason why we have a 40-hour work week is because now we got to go out to eat because we ain't got time to cook. Now we got to pay somebody to do all these other things that we don't have time and capacity to do.
Yeah.
And so you and
Childcare.
I have talked about that when it comes to the word sustainability, what that
Yes.
looks like in our clothing, what that looks like with our time. And so even as you're like saying this, right? Yesterday, I went to the thrift store, girl. Okay. I
Need
went to the
you.
thrift store. I did.
My God, I'm Joe's.
Yeah, but don't be, because
Okay.
I spent money I don't have on things that I didn't need. Right. So
Fair.
even in like, and we've talked about this, is like my goal is to buy it secondhand first.
Yeah.
Right. And try to find things secondhand first. And but it's very easy to get caught up in, oh, this is only $7. Oh, this
Yeah.
is only da da da, right? And then still
Why you
get
done
into
spent
that like
$100?
over consumption, right? Even in going into like, the workplace, having worked from home. And to be clear, in some capacity, I've worked from home my entire career. There's
Yeah.
never been a time that I was not allowed to work from home. Maybe like early on, like 2009, 2010.
Wow.
But I feel like from 2012 on, I was at home in some capacity at least a day or two a week.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the first time I am now in the office 5 days a week. I got to put clothes on.
Girl, I can't imagine. I got on little shorts now.
I got to put clothes on. Right. So now I'm trying to like build this wardrobe, as a Black woman in the office. So in my office, they be coming in there with like all the Columbia and Patagonia on. I'm like, Black people can't dress like that at work, okay? Well, first
Yeah.
of all, I don't want to dress like that, period. But we can't dress like that. We can't dress like that at work. You
Yeah.
have to show up
And show out.
Whether it's healthy or not, I
Mhm.
was raised that we have to be twice as good to get half as much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that has proven true for me. I shouldn't say it's true. I have collected evidence that that is
Mhm.
true over the years, right? I have never had a supervisor more educated than me.
Not
Never.
a one.
Not
Not
one.
a
I
one.
have never they rarely have more experience than me,
Not a
right?
one.
So, and oftentimes you're the only one. I know, like, even in my current role, when I got there, maybe a couple months into the role, I learned that there had been another Black woman on the team who, like, moved into another part of the organization, right? So when they saw me come, they thought I was gonna be like the big personality that she had been, right? I was gonna bring all this energy to the team. And I love her. She's amazing, right? She's amazing. She and I, we talk all the time. And I'd be like, girl, I'm not you.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to fill your shoes either. If they hired me because they thought I was gonna be the magical Negro in the room, they hired the wrong one, right? So it's
Magical
like
Negro. It's
I
crazy.
keep saying that because it's just on my mind, right? I
It's
don't know why it's like front of mind, but I'm saying that to say, like, when we talk about like the hypervigilance, I'm all over the place. The
full circle.
capitalism,
No,
the
you're good.
overspending, the collecting things that we don't need, which is still connected to having to be in the office, having to show up a certain way, having to have this job so that you can pay your bills, right? But also hypervigilance and like, I stick out. I'm the only one here who looks
Yeah.
like me, right?
Yeah.
The only person here. They'd be like, oh, girl, I love your braids.
They're locks or
I know. I don't correct them. It's fine. Whatever.
thank you.
It feels like, right? Because I stick out,
Mhm.
I have to show up as my best or
Yeah.
whatever they perceive to be best,
'Cause
right?
you're being watched.
Or twice as good. Yes. And even when I'm not being watched, I'm the only one in a sea of people who don't look like me, right? And so, to your point, went to the thrift store yesterday, spent all this money on stuff that I don't need. Now, my mom would say, oh, girl, you got a lot of items for that amount of money, right? That's what
Yeah.
she would hype me up. Like, you
Yeah.
did good, girl. At the
Yeah.
same time, it is hard to get out of the cycle.
Yeah.
Even when I'm saying, like, I don't wanna buy into it, right? Even certain things that I bought at the thrift store yesterday, right? There are certain things I would not physically go into a store and purchase. Like, I still ain't been to Target, right? I still have not been back to Target. I really don't miss it, honestly. I also think I've saved a lot of money not walking their
That's right.
aisles, but their plus size brand, their jeans fit me
Mm.
really well. And so I needed a new pair of jeans and I was like, I'm not going in there. I'm not.
Yeah.
So guess where I found them?
At the
At the
thrift
thrift
store.
store, right? Which is like, well, I'm not putting no money in their pockets. It's fine. I can buy these, right?
Yeah.
So it's the capitalism also impacts our finances,
Yes.
right? It forces us to spend.
Yes.
It forces us to spend. And I think, at least in my experience as a Black woman, it feels like either you are going to get in line and do it or you're going to be left behind, going back to that twice as good. If I show up in Patagonia at work, it's not going to be received the same as when my boss or their boss does
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And that's all about identity. And it's you know, let's go back. So one with a hypervigilance, it can become your identity, right? That now I'm so aware of how people are aware of me that I'm not aware of myself. And that's a dangerous, dangerous
Say that
space.
again.
I'm so aware of how people are aware of me that I'm not aware of myself. So when we recognize that's the cost of hypervigilance, the actual survival tactic, if this is a choice of survival, it's probably more dangerous to not be aware of yourself than it is to be aware of other people being aware of you. And so that is a way to combat it. That when I go into a place where I feel that there is a risk because of a target of my identity, my performance, my culture, my presence, my basic needs, because my finances connect to this space, I surely better be aware of myself first. Then use the wisdom and knowledge of my awareness of how people are aware of me second. So it's not wrong. It's just out of order because you're more vulnerable when you have less self-awareness because you don't
Absolutely.
even know the vulnerabilities that you have. And so When we go from that space and then we're in the capitalist cycle, the rat race, the cycle of shopping and all of that, then that feeds us. So it actually becomes it's not only feeding the capitalism, it's feeding our identity. We're getting it back. We get to create. We get to spin in creation. We get to shop. It feels good. It fuels us up. It gets us back to us, right? So now they've created not only a habit of that cycle of capitalism, but a dependency on it too. Because I don't know about you, I feel freedom when I get to explore looks and fashion and I'm in Sephora all day and it's like, oh my God, this is my freedom. Well, that's because I've spent all day in a cage.
Yes. And that's how I felt yesterday at the
Yeah.
thrift store. I was like, ooh, like,
Hmm.
I was like, ooh, because I've also been looking for things for my house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I found a painting. I found, just all of
Yes.
it's. And so you're right. And I think that's also just like a reinterpretation of the exact same thing, the exact same experience. And like, oh no, Kristen, you do get freedom from even, wait till I show you this leather coat that I got.
I am like, I want to see the whole shop. I want to see the whole
It
bag.
is so me. It is so
I
me. And
bet.
I was so excited, right? I
And
was
that's
so excited
good.
when I found it. And it feels like it has paisley. It's got a little paisley. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love a paisley print.
You do.
And
You do
so
love
you're
a
right.
paisley
It
print.
is, it is a form of expression. And what I hear you saying is when you talk, it goes back to that emotional regulation.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's not bad. It's just being aware of it, right? And what are you serving in the moment? It's all about awareness. Hypervigilance is awareness, but it's misrepresented in some of these examples, right? That you have that awareness of yourself. Turn that hypervigilance into self. You're gonna know exactly when you need water, when you need a banana because you're on potassium. You're gonna know when you need that magnesium. Like, think about the power of that. And so when you
Yes.
invert that hypervigilance and make your awareness of self priority, then you will feel the freedom even in the midst of the cage, right? And you will be able to regulate faster in how your emotions are responding to how others are responding to you. It's just a flip.
It is a flip, and it's really the same thing. So what I was sitting here thinking was, would you what would you say to someone who how would you help someone, and I know how as a from a as a mental health counselor, how, as a therapist, how you would help somebody become more self-aware.
Yeah.
So let me just my line of thinking with what you just said.
Okay.
In the same way that I asked questions of my supervisor, right? When I got back, well, what is the priority? What is by when do you need this? All of those things helped his awareness, helped my team's awareness, right? And like, this is not an emergency, are the same questions that I could be asking myself, right?
Yes. Yes.
Or which I think I do probably
You
ask my
do.
questions a lot of times. But part of that is because I have a therapist, I have a coach, I am a coach, right? Like,
Yes.
so
Yes.
I
Covered.
probably ask more questions than I have answers. For somebody who may not have a relationship with a therapist or,
Hmm.
any of the helping or, a helping profession to help them uncover some of those blind spots,
Yeah.
how would you recommend that they go about objectively uncovering some of those blind spots and cultivating awareness?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because it's going to feel subjective at first because it's so cloudy. And it can be scary. And so, one, I would just encourage that person to be honest. Like, think of the deepest secret thought that you have in this very moment that you're burying behind a lie that may be acceptable, right? So it doesn't feel like a lie, like a little white lie we tell ourselves about society and our day and how we feel, right? Flow in writing or in a word vomit what your secret is. You didn't even got to tell me, go to the bathroom, look in the mirror, tell yourself the secret, write it down and then start jotting down the feelings that come up for you in that moment, right? Like, don't hide the feeling, right? But just think about it like you whispering something. When a kid whispers something, I gotta pee.
Mhm.
Like, it starts when we're small. I gotta pee.
Mhm.
Kill
Yeah.
myself. You know, like when you think about how a kid does that, like, but
Yeah.
it's a secret. Like they only gonna whisper it to mommy. Like whisper that to yourself in a journal, in a voice memo, get the feelings out, but make sure you're in a safe place where you can have the day, right? And sit in it. Sit in it, right? Sit in it. If you have a safe person you can identify, share with them, have them take up space with you, like where they're just present with you and see how that feels. And it'll start unraveling the lies that you rehearse because it's usually a package of lies that we just put in as a barricade around our truth.
Yeah.
And that decreases our awareness because we're behind the lie. You have to break that. That's a small exercise, but it has to be journaling, like a free write or a free thought exercise through a voice memo that allows your subconscious to speak. Meditative states always work. And so being very grounded in your breathing, your breath work, I truly believe in that. Doing breath work, prayer for sure. But we have to tell the truth. It always starts with telling yourself the truth. That promotes awareness.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is your assumptions, beliefs, and values,
Yes.
and uncovering those beliefs. And you're right, it can be challenging to do that on your own.
Yes.
I think the other thing, so when you said like a brain dump, like I used to do this every morning, which I'm like, oh, maybe I need to get back to that. They call it morning pages, where you just write for 3 pages every morning, and like whatever comes out, no judgment around it. But it's also a space to get it out. It's like
Yes.
one less thing that you're holding on to. And when you talked about like the emotions or the feelings, that's the part that I know I struggle with. I struggle with, and I think everyone does. Even with my children, right? When we talk about feelings, and they're young, right? So if they say I'm sad, I feel like that's a good starting place, right? But I'm like, okay, well, what else? Till we get to frustrated, till we get to left out, to, like what, like,
Deeper.
right? But also forcing myself to do that. And it can be really, really uncomfortable, really
Yes.
uncomfortable.
And challenging to identify. No one is too old for a feelings chart or a feelings wheel.
Listen, I got one right
Like
over
order
here.
one on
Okay.
Amazon. Like get you feelings
Yes, I
wheel,
got mine
feelings.
on Etsy. Got mine on Etsy.
And for people who don't know, it's a wheel. It has the foundational feelings around it, and then you go deeper and deeper and deeper with more descriptives, and you just pick it. You just pick I'm sad, and it'll go deeper into descriptors so you get to like a true association with sadness that's relevant to your.
Those are tools that we can use to help uncover some of our blind spots
Mhm.
and gain some awareness. And, something, especially in the workplace, I do think, and I think that's an amazing place to start as an individual, right? Because that awareness you bring to every situation, every conversation, right? So, me having that level of awareness or doing that work when I go into a meeting or I go into, coming back to work off of that stressful week, I am able to approach things differently than somebody who hasn't dumped that stuff out and is holding it all and bringing it with them into a space, right? So when we get tools, oftentimes the coping strategies, especially even in the workplace, are very individualistic, which is much like our society, right? It's like this
Yeah.
is what you need to do.
Yeah.
I think there are limits though to like how much those coping strategies work, not for the individual, but for the environment itself that could feel unsafe or unpredictable.
Yeah.
And I want, I kind of want to hear it from you because you are the professional, like I tell my staff, like told you, I tell my staff, like we're creating the culture
Yeah.
here, right? And also, my staff is still virtual. They're not physically in the office with me, right?
Wild.
I don't know if you knew that, but yeah, no,
No,
I go into an office to sit by myself and manage a team that's spread out all over the place. So, no, you know,
that makes no sense, but
I know it doesn't, but capitalism and
I was gonna
control
like
and
literally I said it in my mind, but I don't
yeah.
want to.
What would you, so for someone like me
Mhm.
or anybody who's feeling some angst in their workplace environment,
Yeah.
Maybe I just gave the answer to myself in my head, but, what would you recommend for, I'm doing the things individually, I'm attempting to bring this into the workspace, and the workplace is still gonna be unpredictable, the workplace is still
Yeah.
gonna be, for many, still feel unsafe.
Yeah.
What are some ways that, whether in a dyad or in a small group, someone can start to question, cover, share, if you will, uncover what's working, share what is,
Yeah.
in a way that could help create the illusion of safety? And I'm saying illusion because safety,
Mhm.
it's all an illusion, right? It's like, do you feel safe? It doesn't mean that you actually are. You can feel safe in a moment in an unsafe environment. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think it's all about problem solving, right? In a group setting, I think it's about allowing collaborative problem solving. And that's how that is a very simple way you can approach it, right? That these patterns in work environments impact the health of whatever product you all are addressing. It just does, right? If we want to admit it or not, it affects the bottom line. It affects performance. It affects the bottom line. And so I think to promote collaboration in a group setting in a work environment, it has to be presented and delivered as a collaborative problem solving session. And so that one empowers employees to identify problems, and it activates their boldness and creativity in offering solutions that not only promote impact on retention of staff and showing how retention of staff impacts product, right? Whatever that product is, but also the retention of staff impacting morale, which then impacts the perception of that agency by community and future workforce, which is compromised because people would rather be entrepreneurs than to apply for a job, and they can just go viral on TikTok. And so, right, like so you have to offer it that way. In doing so, with that type of goal, it invites people to be honest and creative. When people are honest and creative, they feel safe and they feel excited. And if they're a contributor, then they feel purposeful, right? That is all people. That's the kind of safety people want at work. Like, because I think we have to be careful not to bring emotional regulation so much into work in an overt way, but that's a way to invite it in a covert way. And then as those problems and solutions are identified with those flip charts that you do and those big old posters on the wall and color markers and the lighting and snacks that are like exciting fruit, right? Like water has some cucumbers and mint. It creates safety based on how you're offering regulation on all of the senses, right? On all
Yeah.
of the senses, group work, timed work. It even promotes that level of excitability about fast, passionate production, right? So now you see your employees performing. Well, you can get that same outcome without bullying and
Yeah.
forcing and putting their jobs and their livelihood on the line. So now you're demonstrating the evidence of that by just doing this exercise and then offering a way to evaluate how did that experience feel for you? And why did that experience give you that emotion? Ask the people who got the feelings. Like, when we invite them into the solution, it works. And so that's honestly how I would do it in a work environment.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying is connected back to the organizational values, right? So
Oh,
when you're doing the work at home, when you're dumping it all out on paper or in a voice note, you are working through your individual assumptions, beliefs, and values, right?
yes,
But when you move it into the workplace, you are prioritizing and centering the assumptions, beliefs, and values of the organization, right?
yes,
And tying everything back to the mission or whatever the overall goal is of your team, your division, and the overall organization. And so it's really about alignment,
yes.
right?
Yes.
alignment, and I think you can make that comparison on an individual level too. Think about how you feel as an individual when you are in alignment,
Yes.
right? And so as when you're stepping into a workplace, right? It's not about you as an individual being aligned with the organization's goals, but your work being aligned, right?
Yes.
And that's also an opportunity for a check-in. Like when you talked about some people choosing or not wanting to be a part of certain organizations anymore, that's when you get to say the organization's beliefs and values may not be aligned with mine or the work that I want to do
Yes.
in this world, what I choose to contribute,
Yes. Or the interpretation or their interpretation
their
of their
interpretation of
values
it. Yeah.
change, right? And so our interpretation of the values vary, then the implementation of those values won't align either. But it's all okay because at the end of the day, this is all self discovery in the first place. And when we remember that that's what it was in elementary school and in high school and in college and in the workforce was self discovery, then we give ourselves permission to detach when we're no longer aligned and to remain empowered that our self discovery got us here in the first place. So it will take us forward. But when we get anchored in it with a sense of permanency that and then we're forcing alignment, that's when things get compromised and that invites mental health. A lack of alignment always promotes mental health that is compromised because who are you, and what are you doing and why? So it needs to feel like when you applied. It needs to feel like when you applied for the job, and when it doesn't, it's probably
But I
time to.
I think that piece about self-discovery is really important though, because even if you as an individual say that again?
I was saying, take me back. I'll just fly past a very significant point. You always bring me back. Y'all see her grounding me? Thank you. Yes, ground the therapist.
The
Amen.
self-discovery piece, right? And
Yes.
we talk about that from an individual perspective, but organizations do it too, right?
Yes.
And I think sometimes we forget that because when you said it, I'm like, yeah, people go through rebranding. People change their mission. People,
Yes.
I mean, really, and this is the thing. The only thing constant is change. And so even thinking back to some of MLK's fear around what would happen to the movement, right? And even before, if people knew, right, about what he was managing. But also, I think the movement changed. It is
Yes.
constantly changing, right? And I
Yeah.
think we forget that. Like, we're in an organization and we're like, oh, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always going to be. They ain't never going to, whatever. But everything changes, right?
Yeah.
Everything changes constantly. The organization that I went to speak at, they just did 2 rounds of layoffs. But my point of contact was like, the pendulum is gonna swing, right? There's gonna be a time when we're have a hiring surge again, right? That's going to happen. You can look at what's happening in the government, right? Institutions that people thought were never going to change are changing, right? Now, whether or not you're in alignment with it is a separate conversation. But as change happens, because it's happening, the thing is, change has been happening, whether you realize it or not, right?
Yes.
Or whether you've chosen to acknowledge it or not, right?
Yes.
There was a time when, even just the technology, right? Think about how the work that we're doing is changing, how people want us to use AI more often and
Mhm.
or, think about how Zoom and Teams and all of these things changed the workplace. Back in the day, it would have been the typewriter changed the
Yes.
workplace, So I think that's important because while you're on a journey of self discovery, it could be helpful to approach your work in the same way and
Yes.
constantly discovering, not coming to work with like I gotta do this. I
Mhm.
gotta do that. It's what can I uncover today? What can I learn about this organization today or where we're going? And how does what I do or the
Yes.
work that I want to create and contribute align with that
Or not.
or not? Yes. And
Yes.
that feels so much better to say.
Lighter, lighter. And
Yes.
honestly, because it's all about word association. Because even when I hear you say change so many times, I'm thinking about the listener that doesn't like change, right? But you know what we're all excited about? Evolution.
Mm.
Hey, evolution is change. Like,
Mhm.
it's the same. Evolution is change, self-discovery, evolution, it's all change. And so I think that unpacking whatever is associated with the word change that promotes fear, uncertainty, anxiety, or flashback of a change that really shook your foundation in a way that you didn't know how to regulate. There are other words, and
Yeah.
evolution is one of them
Yeah.
that we had all universally get excited and thrilled about. We love to evolve. That feels
Yeah.
empowering, that feels significant. And that is all that you're describing is evolution of society, technology, identity, values, systems. That's what it is. Self-exploration, self-discovery, and evolution. And that is what Martin Luther King had in mind was the evolution. But he may have gotten so caught up in his own stuff about change, right? Because that's also fear. And his identity was grounded in a movement. And so then what significance, the fear of what significance he could have had after that. Think about it. Who would he be? We don't know, right? And it's not a shade to him, but everybody can attach to a movement and then don't realize that you're locked into something and you want evolution, but you don't know what it's going to feel like when it happens. So if we
Mhm.
realize that today, no matter what changes that are occurring that may be harmful to us, we are still living in the hope of Martin Luther King and so many people before, because we are still getting to evolve despite the hardship. We get to evolve and self-discover still today in 2026. We still get that privilege. And that is still something to celebrate every day, every day.
That was good
Okay.
stuff.
Amen.
Yes. I think that's a good place to end, that we get to. We get to evolve. We're still here with the opportunity to continue evolving. Thank you for that, Stephanie. Anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we go?
Stay encouraged. Just stay encouraged and know that you're enough. Like you are enough. And so enjoy being present in that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it, really. So, Kristen, as we close, and thank you for having me, I appreciate it. What is one thing that you want to tell the audience before we go?
Yeah, so I think it's that we can still be joyful in all of it, right? I think that's something that I've really struggled with when I see not so great things happening in the world is I will feel guilt.
Mm,
Guilt that I have it good or that I'm safe or feel safe, that my children are safe, that I get to tuck them in to a bed at night in a warm home, that I wake up in the morning and put on music and dance, you
mm,
know?
mm,
But I had a conversation with a friend around just generally speaking I think, I don't know if you've done this, but I've looked back in the past and, wondered who would I have been in the movement? How would I have shown up?
mhm.
Right. And
Oh, boy, Vegas.
one thing that I knew was that I was not a frontline girly. I knew that, right? There's a book, I think the boys have it on their shelf, but I don't remember the name of it, but it's about this woman, and I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, I'll find it, who baked goods during the Montgomery bus boycott.
Mm,
Because people have to be fed, right? People have to be fed. People had to still get to work, not on the bus, So there are different roles to play in
yeah.
any movement, whether it's we're talking about the things that are happening in the world or the things that are happening in your workplace. And it was a conversation with a friend that really helped me understand that creators matter.
Yes.
And I think if I'm being honest, because I'm creative,
Yes.
right? I'm creative. People don't know this, but I can do some things, like
Yes.
I can do some things and I enjoy them. And I think part of, you know, I don't want to say that like conditioning in the workplace, but really separated me from my creativity.
Yeah.
And my goal last year was really to create more than I consume. That was the goal. That's it. I
Amen.
want to put more out in the world than what I take in.
Mm,
And with what I am taking in, I want to be more intentional about it. And so I think that's the piece, is that you can have joy they can coexist. You don't have to have one over the other, right? And I've shared this in an episode before, which I guess this is timely since yesterday made 2 years since my mom passed. When in that moment when we knew she was getting ready to take her last breath,
Jesus.
I went and got a speaker and turned on music. And it completely shifted the energy in that room. It didn't make us less sad. It created a space for us to hold both our sadness and our love and appreciation for the 68 years that we got with her. To reflect, to remember, right? Even to, just move. And like, even when you talk about that emotional regulation, movement helps with that, right? And music is powerful. So I think that's it. I think that in the midst of everything going on, we can still choose to experience joy without having to feel guilty about it.
Yes, yes. You can be joyful and compassionate because I do think that guilt is perverted compassion. It can just stay at compassion. It's beautiful that you feel that for other people at the depth that you feel it. The guilt is how it's perverted in like a way that it tries to attack you. But you're just very compassionate and you can have joy and be extremely compassionate. And activating both makes sustainable change in people's hearts, even if their circumstance doesn't change. What you describe is a change in the heart posture of your family, but the circumstance didn't change.
Exactly.
It's beautiful, actually. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I had a coach tell me once that the difference between fear and excitement is a breath. It's the same emotion. Can you tell people where they can find you, where they can find and follow you?
Okay, so you can find me on IG and Instagram at The Perspective Liaison. You can find me on LinkedIn, Stephanie Lewis, on Psychology Today, Stephanie Lewis in Beechwood, Ohio. And those are the main ones for me that I would like to share.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today,
Thank
Stephanie.
you. Thank
And
you.
I hope you you enjoy something and with your day off,
So
and that you get to go continue evolving.